Canada just blew up all negotiation talks with the United States on tariffs, and it is going to have a detrimental effect on the Canadian economy. I'm gonna tell you exactly how this is going to go down for Canada if they don't change their way in negotiations with Trump. It's just going to be absolutely disastrous for the Canadian economy. I think they're negotiating in all the wrong way. The ad with the Reagan ad, you don't wanna piss off Trump. And I think that's exactly what they did. I see it as David and Goliath, Canada being David and Goliath being the US and Trump. And the reason that David won and beat Goliath is because he had one shot. He had the slingshot and he took it. He had that one shot and hit him right there square in the head. And he dumped Goliath. And the problem with Canada is that they keep taking all these shots, but they're missing and they're just pissing him off. They're not smart enough to have the strategy to figure out how we take our one shot and we make something of it, to make some kind of movement. And what they're doing is they're just taking it all wrong. I think Doug Ford, I don't think he's the smartest guy in the world. I think that I would have taken his brother, Rob, all day long. Love that guy. I thought he was smart, he had a personality. He woulda coulda negotiated with Trump much better than his brother Doug. And Carney, he is just off in another world. I can't even I would if I had to put my money on anybody in Canada, it would have been Polyev. Polyev could have went head to head with Trump all day long. Carney, he just has no he can't have the stamina to keep up with Trump. So, my name is Delana. I'm from Canada, I'm from Toronto. I live down here in the States now, so I have a perspective kind of on both sides, and I really care about Canada. My dad was a politician. He was part of the NDP. He was the president of the NDP in the North York riding, and he was as far left as you could possibly go, like borderline communist. Like he was just very left, was there for the people. So and I've always kind of leaned a little bit to the right. So I have a pretty good perspective on both sides now that I've been living in the States for over 20 years now. But it's going to be devastating to Canada's economy. So that's what I want to talk about today. What really matters in this economic fallout? Canada and the United States share one of the world's most integrated economies. Every single day, $2.7 billion in goods and services crosses the border. More than three-quarters of all Canadian exports go to the United States. This isn't just trade. They are supply chains so intertwined that components for a single car can cross the border multiple times before final assembly. When Trump imposed tariffs earlier this year, including 35% on most Canadian goods, the damage was immediate. In July, he added steel and aluminum and auto tariffs. Canada retaliated in kind. The trade war was on. Now, with negotiations terminated, Canada faces the true worst case scenario. Now, let me give you the numbers from multiple economic analysis. The Bank of Canada analysis shows that if 25% tariffs remain in place with full retaliation, Canadian GDP growth could be reduced by 2.5 percent points in the first year alone. TD Economic estimates the economy could see output levels at 2.4% lower by the end of 2026. National Bank of Canada dropped their 2025 growth forecast from 1.4% to just 0.4%. What's that translation? Canada could enter a recession. Multiple quarters of economic contraction are within the realm of possibility with this case scenario. The conference board breaks it down by city. Guelph, its manufacturing base could see GDP decline by 2.3% in a single quarter. Hamilton, Steel City, my cousin's from Hamilton, and he was in the steel business and did really well. So it'd be devastating to Hamilton if the steel business would be eliminated or even reduced. Toronto would face a 1.6% hit. Even Ottawa, with its large government sector, wouldn't be immune. It would have job losses. A Deloitte Touche study estimates more than 200,000 jobs could disappear and $275 billion could be wiped out from Canada's GDP by 2030 if severe tariffs remain. Some economists compare this to the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930, the ones widely blamed for deepening the Great Depression. What sectors will bleed the most? Well, I can get very specific here. Ontario's auto sector is ground zero. Trump's auto tariffs particularly devastated this industry. When you oppose a 25% tariff, every time a component crosses the border, and those components cross multiple times during production, the costs multiply exponentially. Canada's auto exports to the US dropped more than 15% in April alone after tariffs hit. I have cousins that work for Magna in Aurora, Newmarket, and Magna headquarters is in Aurora, that's where I'm from, and their factories are in Newmarket, and they've been working for Magna forever. Their whole kind of career has been at Magna, and they've seen a great reduction, and it's been happening a lot. My cousin said it was like month after month, it seems to be dropping and dropping, but luckily, both of them are near retirement age. She said if it just gets too much, then they obviously can retire and they're good, but, it's very sad to see that and Magna is a huge, huge exporter of, GM parts. And there's also the steel and aluminum. Canada is a major producer. These tariffs don't just hurt the mills, they ripple through construction, manufacturing, everything that uses metal. Energy, Canada supplies massive amounts of electricity and oil to the United States. Earlier this year, Ontario Premier Ford threatened to halt electricity exports, which would have sent US energy bills surging. He backed down, but it showed the nuclear option Canada has and the mutual destruction it could cause. And again, he took a shot and he missed. You can't threaten Goliath. You gotta come in with a strategy because you don't have you can't just start throwing bullets at them and say, "Oh, let's try this," like, it's not gonna work. You just piss them off, and it's just getting worse and worse, and there's no end to this. And this latest ad campaign with Reagan obviously is detrimental, where he's like, "Talks are over. We're done." So, pissing him off is not the answer. You also have agriculture. Canadian farmers already face tariffs as high as 400% from the US on some products. According to Trump's own statements, more tariffs means less access to their primary market. The lumber industry, consumer goods, pharmaceuticals, virtually every sector of Canadian export economy is exposed. So what is gonna be the long-term damage? And this is where I wanna get at. I don't think Canada sees what the effects are going to be long time. Like, tariffs don't just reduce trade volume, they permanently reduce productivity. When businesses can't access their most efficient supply chains, when investment dries up due to uncertainty, when companies move operations to avoid tariff zones, you get a permanent reduction in economic potential. The Bank of Canada analysis makes this clear. While the effect on growth rates is temporary, the level of GDP remains permanently lower. Canada's long run productivity takes a hit from the distortionary effects of tariffs. Business investment will fall. If companies don't invest in expansion, they don't know if their products can cross the border. The Bank of Canada estimates that declining business investment will significantly reduce potential GDP in Canada, leading to a permanent decline in GDP. Unemployment could rise 2 to 3 points, and the unemployment I saw in, I think it was August, was at 6.6, so if it increased another 2, 3 percentage points, at 10%, that's gonna be a huge effect on Canada, especially with the amount of immigration that they have coming in. Where are those people gonna work? What jobs are they gonna have? And that's hundreds of thousands of even just Canadians out of work. And then if they bring in the immigrants and they go on unemployment, how is Canada gonna sustain that? The Canadian dollar will weaken, inflation will spike as retaliation makes imports from the US more expensive. The Bank of Canada projects inflation could jump to 2.5 to 3% range before settling back down. And I can tell you that the prices between here and Canada are just crazy. It's just exponentially higher. I my cousin when I was at my cousin's house this summer, she had, like, 2 or 3 pieces of chicken in a little pack, and it was, like, $30. I was here at, like, a Sam's Club or, like, a Costco, and I had a like, a family pack, probably 6 or 7 chicken breasts. It was, like, $15. And that's just one example. Milk. I remember when I was back in Canada last summer, 3 bags, the 3-liter bags was, like, 10 to $12, and I was like, "What? I can get a gallon of milk here for $1.99." Those are significant like, I have 3 teenage boys. If I was living in Canada, that would be flipping so expensive. I saw someone post on X, just a small pack of steaks from Costco was, like, almost $100. It was like, "What? I can get that here for $40 maybe?" It's just crazy, and taking in consideration the exchange rate, it's just how do you afford to live in Canada? It's just crazy, and then don't get me even started on the liquor, that's just out of control compared to here. But there's also gonna be psychological damages. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has already announced plans to double exports to countries outside the US. And that's not just a trade strategy, that's Canada fundamentally rethinking economic relationships with America. After 230 years of deepening integration, after NAFTA, after USMCA, the trade agreement Trump himself negotiated in his first term, Canada is now actively trying to reduce the dependence on the American market. And that's not something that gets reversed quickly. Step back and look at what's really happening here. And it's not good for Canada. A provincial government ran a political advertisement using the words of a former US president. The current US president called it fraud, claimed it was election interference, and blew up months of trade negotiations. But the negotiations were already troubled. Trump has imposed sweeping tariffs on Canada, claiming national security concerns. He accused Canada of letting fentanyl and illegal immigrants cross the border. He's demanded changes for a trade agreement he himself negotiated. And I think that one of the biggest problem with Canada is that they don't realize that he wants like zero fentanyl coming across the border. He wants zero illegal immigration. And it would when Mexico gets on board and they shut everything down, where is it going to come from? You turn off the tap and this tap, the water's going to start running from another direction, and it's going to start coming through Canada. And I heard, some of the arguments from Canada, like, oh, it's only 10% of what Mexico brought in, but it doesn't matter. Like if one person dies from fentanyl from what came across from the Canadian border, that's one too many. One is too many. One illegal immigrant that comes over here and commits crimes is too much. We're trying to eliminate all of it. I have a friend, whose son died from fentanyl, and it's bad. My heart breaks for him, and people don't understand that maybe if it was your child, you would think differently. I had another friend of a friend of mine whose daughter got kidnapped by an illegal immigrant for purposes of trafficking. We live 100 miles from the Mexican border. I worry about that every single day. I have a 15-year-old daughter. That's what I think of. That's what's important. And Canada's like one of my friends on Facebook was like, "Oh, were you worried about the illegals?" Like, yeah, yeah, I am. I live 100 miles from the Mexican border. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and it worries me when she's out at night, and I literally track her all the time on the Life 360 because I know where she is. Yeah, if I could have a drone over her, I would. Those are things that we worry about. If she goes to a party, is there fentanyl laced in something? Like, I think about this all the time, you know? And then, you know, he has just he's just not negotiating, I think, in good faith. You know, the ad gave Trump a reason or maybe an excuse to walk away from talks, whether he was looking for an exit genuinely or is he outraged. The result is the same, however. America's closest ally, largest trading partner, and neighbor is now in economic limbo. The Supreme Court will hear arguments on November 5th about whether Trump's use of emergency powers to impose these tariffs is even legal. Multiple lower courts have already struck down parts of his tariff regime. If the court rules against Trump, much of this becomes a moot point. But if it doesn't, these tariffs stand. Canada faces years of economic stagnation, permanent job losses, a fundamental reorientation of its economy away from the United States. America loses to higher prices, disrupted supply chains, and less competitive position globally, all over an advertisement that quoted Ronald Reagan's actual words about the dangers of tariffs. So where does that leave us? As of this morning, trade talks are terminated. Ontario has agreed to pause its advertising campaign after this weekend. Premier Ford and Prime Minister Carney have both said they're ready to resume negotiations when America is willing. But Trump is heading to Malaysia for a summit. So is Carney. They'll be there at the same event. Will they talk? Will cooler heads prevail? Or is the trade war between them getting much, much worse? For Canada, the clock is ticking. Every day these tariffs remain in place, more damage accumulates. More jobs disappear. More businesses make permanent decisions to relocate or close. For a television advertisement, it literally costs $75 million. Think about that, Ontario. If you had $75 million that could have went to something else, this ad was detrimental. It did not get you anywhere. $75 million spent on what advertising that he took down within days. It's just and that just pissed him off. Like I said, David's making the wrong shots at Goliath. It's just not working. You know, that Reagan ad, it did make its point about tariffs. Ironically, the response to that ad may prove Reagan was right all along, and we'll see about that. You know, like I said, you got the wrong guys negotiating. Here, have a look at this Reagan Munro. This is the guy that you guys got responsible for making, uh yeah. It's just not like I said, it's just not working. Love this guy. I would I would put money on this guy over his brother all day long. I love Rob Ford. God rest in peace. I think he was a great guy. I don't care if he was into crack cocaine and prostitutes. I don't care. I think he had a good soul. I think that he was good, definitely good for Toronto. I would take him over the current mayor of Toronto all day long, and I would take him in lieu of his brother as well. I think I would put him up with Trump before I'd put his brother up for Trump, and I don't think he would ever have done that ad. I think he gets people more, and I think Carney is just he is a weak representative for Canada. Polyev, all day long. I would have put my money on Polyev all day long. So, guys, let me know your thoughts. Um, you think Carney's the right guy for the job? You think Doug Ford did the right thing by this ad? And do you think these how do you think these tariffs are gonna affect Canada? I think I said I think it's gonna be absolutely detrimental. So let me know your thoughts. Please like, subscribe, share, and I'll talk to you guys soon.